People often imagine disobedience as the natural response to injustice, as if recognizing something as wrong automatically creates resistance. History suggests otherwise. Again and again, people comply not because they are unaware, but because awareness alone does not interrupt behavior. This episode sits in the domain of human nature, not authority, not power structures as drivers, but the quieter mechanisms inside people that allow obedience to persist even when doubt is present. The question is not why people fail to see wrongdoing. It is why seeing it so often changes nothing. Across different eras, different cultures, different situations, the pattern repeats. Individuals describe a moment of recognition, a pause, a feeling that something is misaligned, and then, almost immediately, they continue. They sign the paper, they follow the instruction, they stay silent. This is not usually explained by cruelty. Most of the time, those involved do not see themselves as villains. They describe themselves as ordinary, cautious, responsible. They are trying to avoid disruption. They are trying to preserve stability. They are trying to remain part of something larger than themselves. The inquiry here is simple but uncomfortable. What happens inside a person when moral clarity collides with social belonging? Consider how obedience is often framed as ignorance, as if people comply only because they do not know better. But many historical records suggest the opposite. Letters, diaries, testimonies, and later reflections reveal individuals who knew something was wrong while participating anyway. The awareness existed, the behavior remained. This suggests that knowledge is not the primary barrier. Something else intervenes between belief and action. One recurring pattern is gradual adjustment. Rarely does wrongdoing arrive fully formed. It unfolds in small increments. Each step appears tolerable in isolation. Each decision slightly reshapes the boundary of what feels acceptable. Over time, the original moral reference point becomes distant, almost abstract. People rarely wake up one morning and choose to betray their values. Instead, they adapt. They make exceptions. They postpone resistance. They tell themselves the situation is temporary, or necessary, or not their responsibility. Another pattern involves diffusion. When responsibility is shared, it feels lighter, not absent, but thinner. Each individual feels only a fraction of the weight. The presence of others creates a sense that the burden is distributed, even when the consequence remains intact. This diffusion does not erase awareness. It softens urgency. It creates psychological distance between action and outcome. The result is a quiet permission to proceed. Language also plays a role. Actions are renamed. Harm becomes procedure. Orders become policy. Obedience becomes professionalism. These shifts do not eliminate meaning, but they obscure it. They make the moral dimension harder to access in the moment. This is not accidental. Humans rely on language to organize reality. When language becomes technical or impersonal, emotional friction decreases. The act feels smaller, less personal, easier to complete. Another recurring feature is time pressure. Decisions made quickly leave little space for reflection. Urgency compresses moral consideration. When people feel there is no time to think, they default to established roles and expectations. In these moments, obedience feels efficient. Resistance feels disruptive. Silence feels safe. There is also the cost of standing out. Humans are deeply attuned to social signals. Being visibly out of alignment with a group triggers discomfort, fear, and uncertainty. Even when a person believes they are right, the prospect of isolation can feel heavier than the wrong itself. This is not cowardice in the dramatic sense. It is a quiet calculation, a weighing of risks that happens almost automatically. The mind asks not only what is right, but what will happen if I act on it. Often, the answer is unclear. The consequence of obedience feels known. The consequence of resistance feels unpredictable. Human psychology tends to favor the known, even when it is wrong. Across different historical moments, people describe a similar inner dialogue, a sense that speaking up would change nothing, a belief that refusal would be symbolic at best, harmful at worst. Over time, this belief becomes self-confirming. Silence persists because silence appears rational. Another pattern emerges around identity. People see themselves as certain kinds of individuals: reliable, law-abiding, cooperative. These identities are reinforced by institutions, families, and social norms. Disobedience threatens not only external consequences, but internal coherence. To disobey is not just to act differently, it is to become someone else. And that shift can feel destabilizing. This is especially true when wrongdoing is embedded in routine. When harmful actions are framed as ordinary tasks, the mind treats them as such. Repetition dulls emotional response. What once caused discomfort becomes familiar. Familiarity creates a sense of normality. This does not mean people stop feeling. It means feelings are managed, compartmentalized, postponed. The discomfort does not disappear. It is stored, deferred, sometimes for years. Afterward, many describe surprise at their own behavior. They speak of being carried along, of not realizing how far they had gone until it was over. This distance between intention and outcome is not a failure of intelligence. It is a feature of human cognition under pressure. Another recurring element is trust. People often assume that systems, leaders, or collective processes have been vetted, that someone else has already thought through the moral implications. This assumption reduces personal responsibility. It creates a sense that obedience is reasonable because the burden of judgment has been outsourced. When trust replaces scrutiny, obedience feels justified. Even when doubts surface, they are overridden by the belief that the system would not allow something truly wrong to persist. But systems are composed of individuals making similar assumptions. The result is a loop. Each person waits for someone else to intervene. No one does. There is also the role of gradual commitment. Once someone has complied once, the next compliance feels easier. Consistency becomes a psychological pressure. Admitting that a previous action was wrong threatens self-image. Continuing feels less disruptive than reevaluating. This creates a momentum that is difficult to stop, not because people cannot think differently, but because thinking differently would require acknowledging past complicity. In many accounts, the most intense discomfort does not occur during obedience, but afterward. When time creates distance, when urgency fades, when the language of necessity no longer applies, only then does the full meaning of actions resurface. This delay is significant. It suggests that moral awareness is not absent during obedience, but suppressed by context. When the context dissolves, awareness returns. The pattern is not limited to extreme historical events. It appears in everyday situations, workplaces, families, communities. Small acts of compliance that contradict personal belief, but preserve harmony. Over time, these small acts accumulate, not into dramatic evil, but into quiet erosion, a gradual narrowing of what feels possible. The inquiry then turns inward. If awareness is not enough, what interrupts obedience? What conditions allow people to act against pressure? History offers no simple answer. In some cases, a shift occurs when individuals find others who share their doubts. Collective recognition reduces isolation. It restores a sense that resistance is not singular. In other cases, a moment of personal consequence breaks the pattern, when harm becomes undeniable, when abstraction collapses into direct experience. But these moments are unpredictable. They cannot be engineered reliably. What remains consistent is the fragility of moral action under social pressure, the ease with which belief can be suspended without being abandoned, the speed at which restraint gives way to routine. This raises an unsettling possibility that obedience is not primarily a function of fear or coercion, but of normal human adaptation. That many people who obey while knowing something is wrong are not fundamentally different from those who later condemn such obedience. The difference may lie less in character and more in circumstance. If that is the case, the boundary between moral clarity and moral action is thinner than we like to believe. It depends on context, timing, and the presence or absence of reinforcement. This is not a comforting conclusion. It removes the distance we often place between ourselves and historical wrongdoing. It suggests continuity rather than exception. So the fracture emerges quietly, not as an accusation, but as a question. If recognizing something as wrong does not reliably stop us from participating, what does that say about how we understand responsibility? And if obedience can coexist with awareness, how often do we mistake understanding for restraint? The echo lingers in uncertainty. Human beings are capable of insight. They are also capable of postponing it, of narrowing it, of placing it somewhere it cannot interfere with action. Perhaps the more enduring pattern is not obedience itself, but the belief that awareness alone is sufficient, that seeing clearly guarantees acting clearly. History, observed without judgment, offers a different suggestion, that knowing is only the beginning, and that the space between belief and behavior is where most of the story unfolds. It is in that space that people continue, even when they know. If these questions matter to you, you'll find more of them on Timeless Questions, exploring power, belief, and meaning across time.